to today's webinar, and thank you all for joining. Apologies for any of the issues that you may have experienced with the audio. Again, we're going to go ahead and proceed forward with today's webinar, Understanding and Combating Cyberbullying and Digital Online Hate. My name is William Moore, and I'm with OJJDP NTTAC. And please note that we will record today's webinar, so it will be able to be viewed at a later date. And I've been notified that the echo is gone. Okay, thank you all. I appreciate that. Please note that the webinar will be on NTTAC's YouTube page. You can also contact the OJJDP Help Desk if you would like to receive any additional supporting materials. We have some handouts in the handouts pod where you all are able to go in and actually download any of the, supporting materials that we have as well. These supporting materials will support today's webinar. Just simply click on the name of the file and click the download button. For individuals who are looking to submit any questions to any of our presenters, you may do so by typing your question into the chat box as they arise. Anyone viewing in a group, which means if it's yourself and maybe additional person or two, please let us know by typing in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. If there's no one else in the room, no need to type anything at this time. Please note that attendees will receive a certificate of attendance after today's webinar. Also, be sure to download the group validation form. It's in the handouts pod, and this will allow for us to send the certificate to any additional attendees that are in the room with you today. That being said, I will turn it over to our moderator, Steffi, for today's webinar. Steffi, take it away. And Steffi, you may have to unmute your microphone. Just press the microphone icon in Adobe. And that
Sorry, can you all hear me now? Okay, can you hear me now? Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. As William mentioned, I'm Steffi Rapp, and I'm a program manager at the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention at the U.S. Department of Justice. I want to thank our presenters for presenting and participating in the webinar today, and I will introduce them in the order that you will hear them. We'll first hear from Ms. Angeli Montesa. She is a crime and intelligence analyst for the San Jose Police Department Sexual Assault Investigations Division. Ms. Montesa has experience working with youth with histories of complex trauma and sexual abuse, youth incarcerated for sex crimes, juvenile gang members, youth suffering from mental illness, and cultural sensitivity-based family reunification. She has her master's degree in nonproliferation and terrorism, studies and an MBA specializing in financial crime management, corporate risk management, and compliance, seeking to disrupt the lucrative industry of sexual exploitation. Next, you will hear from Mr. Daniel Kelly, who is the Associate Director of the Anti-Defamation League Center for Technology, Society, which works to ensure justice and fair treatment to all in a digital environment. Mr. Kelly leads the center's work to fight hate, bias, and harassment in the gaming community. Mr. Kelly worked with Dr. Karen Schreier and the Global Game Jam to explore how to increase empathy and reduce bias through the process of game design. He has a Master's of Fine Arts in Dramatic Writing from Hunter College and a BA from Sarah Lawrence College. Following, you will hear from retired Captain Chuck Cohen. Mr. Cohen is Vice President for Strategic and International Initiatives at the National White Collar Crime Center. Retired Captain Cohen is a retired Indiana State Police captain where he served for over 25 years. He was most recently the Commander of Intelligence and Technologies. He was responsible for cybercrime, electronic surveillance, and tech services, including the Internet Crimes Against Children's Unit and the Indiana Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force Program. Mr. Cohen has an MBA from Indiana Wesleyan University and an undergraduate degree in psychology and criminal justice from Indiana University. And finally, we'll hear from Ms. Jerry Ratcliffe. Ms. Ratliff serves as the Deputy Director of the Community Relations Service at the U.S. Department of Justice since 2017. As a member of the Senior Executive Service, Ms. Ratliff has served in leadership capacities at the National Science Foundation and U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services at the Department of Homeland Security. Ms. Ratliff has a BA in Journalism and Speech Communications from the University of North Carolina and a JD from American University and an MPA from Harvard University. Okay, Anjali, I'll now turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anjali Montessa, and I'm the Crime Intel Analyst for the Sexual Assault Unit here at San Jose Police Department in California. This portion of the webinar will cover cyberbullying and sextortion. So let's define the terms first regarding cyberbullying and sextortion. Bullying, once restricted to the school or neighborhood, has now moved into the online world. So cyberbullying is a type of bullying. It is bullying through electronic means. Rather than being bullied in person, the bullying takes place over digital devices, whether it's cell phones, computers, or tablets. And this is done by posting or sharing negative, harmful, false, mean content, personal or private information for the purpose of embarrassing or humiliating. And usually when being bullied in person, the victim knows the person. But cyberbullying can be anonymous and takes place anywhere. Sextortion, on the other hand, is the act of blackmailing or threatening the spread of pictures online that are explicit in nature. The goal of sextortion is for a purpose, including to harass or embarrass, but ultimately it is to make the victim do something or control them. Technology has allowed young people to connect in meaningful ways, such as the opportunity to share videos, photos, and more. But the unsupervised nature of the cyber world means that the demands need for guidance, guidelines, and social responsibility. A study conducted last year revealed that from a sample of 12 to 17-year-olds who had been cyberbullied in their lifetime, 30.1% had been cyberbullied more than once. Almost 50% combined was through either mean or hurtful comments said to the victim on a platform or spreading rumors online about the victim, which seem to be the primary cyberbullying forms that is being seen. This is then followed by threats of harm and posted comments about the victim with a sexual innuendo. In a study regarding sextortion among adolescents, the study revealed that 85% of victims were threatened for sexual explicit imagery were 13 years or younger. Now, how the percentage of victims, you'll see that the percentage of victims threatened decreases as the victim age increases. Know that child sexual abuse imagery, commonly known as child pornography, predates the digital era. Whether it was sending photos by mail or even floppy disks, child pornography was still being circulated. Now, with smartphone cameras, social media, and cloud storage, these have allowed the images to multiply at an alarming rate. In a piece posted by the New York Times last year, it writes about the rapid proliferation and spread of sexual abuse imagery in the last 20 years and how tech companies and law enforcement are falling behind in their abilities to keep up. To give you a sense of what we are dealing with, a little over than 20 years ago, there were 3,000 reports of child sexual abuse imagery. Since then, we've had the development of cell phones, the internet, and social media. Just over 10 years ago, reports surpassed 100,000. Then in 2014, it surpassed 1 million for the first time. Then in recent years, there were over 45 million images and videos flagged as child sexual abuse. To put this in another perspective, the telephone took decades to reach 50 million global users. And then we had Pokemon Go. And that spread within 2.5 weeks to 50 million global users. Now, we are all trying to play catch up, even more so with criminals who are using encryption and virtual private networks to stay ahead. Many companies have made recent progress in identifying material and generating cyber tips to the National Center for Exploited and Missing Children. And they determine the appropriate law enforcement jurisdiction, but even then, with our own task force here in Silicon Valley, we received over 3,500 cyber tips last year in 2019. This year, in 2020, from January 1st up to today, we received 2,458 to date, and that's just in 4 months. Just in April alone, we received 712 cyber tips, which is the all-time record in the past 18 years that we've been operating. In March, we received 530. So in the last 60 days, we received 1,242 cyber tips. And where is this happening? It's happening everywhere, whether through text message, social media, forums, online gaming, basically any platform where people can view, participate in, and or share content. Here's a recent sheet of 15 trending apps, and you'll find this on our website at sdicac.org. There are many more than these, of course, but these are the most of what we're seeing. When cyber tips are generated from tech companies, many of them come from here. And keep in mind, Instagram is now considered, quote unquote, the old app. My favorite one to point out on here is Omegle, where the slogan is talk to strangers. Ask.fm is one platform where cyberbullying happens often, and it's linked to some pretty severe forms of it. And this is because it allows anyone to post anonymous comments and questions to a person's profile. Its purpose is for question and answering. When you sign up, you can post questions that anyone can answer or answer questions coming from others. This idea is to let users engage each other, but it generally leads to arguments and people ganging up on each other. By the end of the thread, a child's account can quickly fill up with a stream of anonymous, hurtful messages that may or may not be coming from people they know. And then I included on here an alternative to YouTube as well, finding that many parents are in the habit of putting YouTube on for their kids to watch shows. But what we forget here that there are some ads on YouTube that may be inappropriate for young kids. So an alternative to that is a more kid-friendly one, which is YouTube Kids. It's not perfect, but it still requires parental oversight, but it is much better at filtering content than regular YouTube. Now I'm just going to move forward with basic internet safety. It's important for parents to pay attention to profiles and what kind of content is revealed. On Instagram, for example, you can set profiles to private so that the whole world does not see your child's photos that they post. A rule of thumb is to keep bios simple, because even if Instagram profiles are set to private, bios are still open to the public. So here you can see this person posted their location, email, and even additional website. This is not something that you would want your child to post. Instagram has become a great marketing and business platform, but it's not something that children should reveal sensitive information on. You want to also turn off GPS location on your apps. Do not post photos with the location or share location like in SnapMap or Instagram geotags. In Snapchat, there's the ability to set the profile account to ghost mode where others cannot see your location on the map. And it's also important to validate child's friends, their friends and their followers and who they're following. You can see a number of their followers, which are people who are following your child, and the number of following, people your child is following on the profile section of Instagram. I've had parents come up to me many times after classes and realize that the number of followers who were following their child was like 1,000, and the number of people that their child was following was 20. So something like that should alarm you as a parent. And like, how does your child know 1,000 people, right? That parent made their child sit down with them and go into their followers list and one by one unfollow all of them. So have that conversation with your child to not be just button happy and just start pressing accept to every follower request that they receive. So know that on most devices you can set parental controls. For Android, this will be in the Play Store settings. And for Apple devices, this will be under screen time. You can limit the time they are on the device and restrict the content that they view, especially content that's inappropriate. You can also control app purchases. For parents who have not given a device to their child yet, this should be one of the first things that you do. So that when your child goes into the App Store to download an app, they will have to go to you first for a password. This will give you the ability to not allow your child to have the app, or if you do allow them, then now you know what platforms they have an account on now. And here are some conversation starters for parents and their children. It's important to discuss the importance of being safe online, like not sharing location or setting profiles to private. Choose the right username. Don't create variations of your real name. Set rules and guidelines by limiting screen time use, appropriate websites and apps, and social media usage. Research friends and followers' requests before you allow your child to accept them. Remind children that once send is clicked, there is no undo button. So it's important to think before you post, text, or share. And it's never too early to start the conversation. Kids are getting tablets in kindergarten, and they're learning to use them at a faster rate than the rest of us. Instead of playing catch-up, stay ahead and keep having those conversations. And here are some resources for how parents, school personnel, and the community can work to prevent and intervene should situations occur. In general, the community should stay involved and keep the conversation flowing. This continues to build safe environments, especially in continuing to educate each other on new trends and what's going on. Create a strategy on how to respond and sustain these efforts for the future. If you're a member of the community who works with at-risk youth and families, creating environments to educate and equip parents in protecting their children is key. Here in Silicon Valley, our task force launched the Vigilant Parent Initiative program, which is a class geared towards parents to help them navigate technology and social media. The basic internet safety that I just discussed is actually part of a 1.5-hour class broken up into 2 parts, where we navigate through Instagram and Snapchat in one class and TikTok and Discord in another, as well as understanding how to set parental controls on Android and Apple devices. The class is interactive since we provide iPad stations for parents who may not have social media accounts, and we walk parents through step-by-step tutorials. The idea is to help parents to understand these apps and emerging technology, as well as how to address it with their children. We present it for the Public Defender's Office and work with parents who have to fulfill mandated parenting classes, and I've received a number of requests from school liaisons and social workers assigned to the schools. For parents, it's important to lead by example in your own uses of technology and demonstrate appropriate behavior. Don't use the phone as a pacifier for your child. Instead of giving your phone to keep your child distracted, think about what was given to you when you were a kid to stay occupied. I remember having coloring books when I was young, and as I got older, I was always told to bring a book. I always tell parents to be proactive and remain curious. Monitor their internet usage and be vigilant in checking their devices. Block harmful content and users. Should an incident occur, respond by saving all evidence and not panicking by deleting, and report it as soon as possible. Do research and stay up to date with what your child is interested in, especially on the latest trends. Learn how to navigate the apps yourself, and even have fun with your child and make some TikTok videos with them. And in the words of our task force commander, Sergeant Pierce, giving your child access to the world via the internet is the same as giving the world access to your child. For schools, establish a healthy culture of respect and inclusion. Everyone on campus should stay involved and keep an eye out. Also get parents involved. Educate staff on indicators that may suggest victimization, and have teachers post a code of conduct in all classrooms. Also, like parents, save all evidence when responding to incidents and report it as soon as possible. For providers that have moved to an online platform to host youth activities and classes, bring up topics like cyberbullying and healthy forms of communication on platforms. I've seen some really great TikTok videos, PSAs about cyberbullying, and providers that can get youth to create as part of a homework assignment or project. I've also seen teachers incorporate some school topics on TikTok that may not be as exciting to learn, but it helps keep the kids engaged. There are also many resources out there surrounding the topic of technology, children, and cyberbullying. So for cyberbullying, I recommend 3 great websites: stopbullying.gov, kidsagainstbullying.org, and teensagainstbullying.org. These are some great data on research about the incidence of cyberbullying and victimization on these websites. And the National Bullying Prevention Center on pacer.org has great resources for the classroom and for parents. It also has information about how the community can get involved and develop anti-bullying campaigns. Gaggle safety management is something we've seen here in our area, and it's been adopted by many schools in our area to protect students online. Some of the intelligence gathered by Gaggle sent to administrators are like school and alcohol use, intentions of violence, sexual content, hate speech, and pornography. And for parents, I recommend commonsensemedia.org or connectsafely.org. And now you can find links to other resources as well on our task force website, svicac.org. We have provided resources for the community, parents, teachers, and youth. There are also great videos and a recent short PSA that we created regarding 5 tips for parents. And also on the website, you'll find information about the Vigilant Parent Initiative program, where you'll find links for parents regarding social media platforms. And the 15 apps that parents should know about is also on this page. And in closing, in the words of our commander again, Sergeant Pierce, giving your child uninterrupted access to the internet is no different than leaving them home alone with the front door unlocked. So from the San Jose Police Department's Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, thank you for having me today and being engaged in this webinar. And I wish everyone safety and good health during these times. Now I'll pass it along to Mr. Daniel Kelly, Associate Director of the Center for Technology and Society Anti-Defamation League. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, I'm Daniel Kelly. I'm the Associate Director of the Center for Technology and Society and the Anti-Defamation League. The mission of ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, is to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and secure justice and fair treatment for all. In the Center for Technology and Society, we focus on how do we secure justice and fair treatment to all people in digital environments. And so I want to start sort of taking a step back, and thanks for the amazing presentation, Anjali. But I do want to take a step back here and talk about why, why digital spaces are important and the problems that we're seeing in them. So on this slide, we can see a quote from the early days of the internet, where John Perry Barlow, who's a great thinker, spoke about what the potential of this new digital space was. And so the quote in bold, may it be more humane and fair than the world your governments have made before. So there was this sort of utopian vision of the internet, and I think as we think about fighting hate, protecting young people, protecting adults against the harms in these spaces, it's helpful to think back to the goal and to the vision of it originally, and to what it should look like when we are successful in this work. But to go a little bit into where we are now, ADL has done a variety of surveys looking at the experience of targets of hate and harassment in digital spaces. We've looked at it both from the perspective of social media and also looked at online games. We'll go into a little more detail on these surveys in a minute, but I think it's worth flagging that 57% of adults, of American adults, have experienced some form of online harassment, and 38% have changed their behavior as a result of online harassment. And we'll go into that in a little more detail in a second. But the online harassment has real-world consequences on people who experience it. And the same is true also of hate and harassment in online games. 53% of American adults, so this gaming survey focused specifically on adults 18 to 45 who play games, and 53% felt that they'd experienced some form of harassment due to their identity. And 23% were exposed to white supremacist ideology in online games. So this is people, we asked respondents if they had been exposed to conversations about the superiority of whites and the inferiority of non-whites, which is sort of unambiguous white supremacist language. And 23% of respondents said, yes, absolutely, they've been exposed to that, which is extremely concerning. And so I'm going to talk a little bit now about what online harassment looks like. This is a sort of chart that shows how online harassment manifests in different phases. And so we can see it starts from a place of being an isolated offensive, and it moves into cyberbullying, which is we generally think about in terms of young people. Cyber stalking, which is the same kind of harassment, but is typically aimed at adults. Cyber violence, which includes sort of threats of violence, and campaign or network harassment, where you have people coordinating, engaging people online, coordinating across different social media platforms, and is generally, in terms of types of harassment, the most sort of coordinated and intense. So looking here at our survey of online harassment, I think something to point out here are what we mean when we say severe harassment. So 37% of adults reported experiencing severe harassment online. And when we say that, we mean physical threats, sexual harassment, stalking, and sustained harassment, the last category I had mentioned on the previous slide. Then these categories were based on a study that was done in 2017 by the Pew Research Institute, and I think speaks to there are some people who try to minimize online harassment as being experiences that only sort of fall in the top categories of name calling and perhaps purposeful embarrassment, but these are real harms that have real impact on folks. And they have folks, they impact on folks based on their identity. So here you can see a record of our data around people's experience and what groups felt that they were targeted because of their identity in these social media spaces. And this is something that I think we really need to sort of dive in a little bit more on, which is this is the impact that online harassment had on individuals. So people, 38% of folks stopped or changed their online activity, 18% contacted the platform, 15% took steps to reduce their physical safety, 6% contacted the police. 6% of American adults felt that the harassment they experienced in online spaces was so intense that they needed to contact the police. And even if you go up to the top, to the 38%, when people, we have had conversations with folks who experience hate online, and when they go to various authorities, sometimes they're told, oh, just get offline, don't exist in these spaces. And these things, it's, certainly in the current environment we're in, and in general, it is harder and harder to not exist in a digital space. So when someone says they stopped or changed their activity online because of online harassment, they're denying themselves opportunities based on their jobs, opportunities for their career, opportunities for connection between to different communities, opportunities to express their personal identity if their in-person life doesn't allow for that kind of expression. So this is sort of gets at some of the impacts on targets here. And we have here, I'll just put up a few slides here which focuses the focuses on the experience of various folks who experienced online harassment, and sort of just a more personal view of what it did to these individuals, and the sort of emotional toll that it had on them, and the sort of the lack of responsiveness of many of the tech platforms as they report harassment. And I'll transition here to talking a little bit about online games. So to this point, I've really been focusing on speaking about, it looks like it went backwards here. I've been focusing on thinking about social media. And so here I'm going to talk a little bit about online games as social platforms. So online games are social platforms in the same way that social media is a digital social platform. They connect individuals across the world to communicate, whether it's in voice or text chat. They have rules for how you can behave in those spaces, and they have penalties that are implemented either by the community or by the company in terms of what is appropriate and what is not. Here we see a quote from the CEO of Epic Games, who created a very popular game called Fortnite, saying that in many ways Fortnite is like a social network. You'll see people performing concerts in Fortnite these days. It becomes part of young people's social experience that they go to school and then they come back home and are playing Fortnite together. And here we can see a quote of an experience of someone who was targeted by hate and harassment in these spaces. So one of the things that's unique about online games is that they have the ability to have people speak on the mic, speak via voice in online game spaces. And as a result of that, when certain people speak who belong to different identity groups, they themselves can be identified by other players as an identity and attacked because of it. And this description sort of lays that out, that people from different identity groups are being silenced, essentially, because they feel like if they speak on the mic in these spaces, they will be attacked. And so these are the norms of the online game spaces at present, and these need to be changed. This is, again, a survey that we did which focused on hate and harassment in online games, and you can see that the numbers are even more stark when we talk about online games. The groups are fairly similar in terms of who is targeted by hate and harassment in online games. And people often ask when they see this, well, how do people know someone's identity? And as I said, they can be identified by voice. They can be identified by the type of avatar that they're playing, the kind of character that they're playing, the username choice. All these are both tools that people use to target individuals, and also sort of hard lessons that individuals are forced to realize expose themselves in these spaces. So I've been talking to women who are targeted in these spaces, and they say they don't put any kind of identifying adjectives in their usernames to identify themselves as women because they know if they do, they're going to be judged, attacked, and so forth. And as I said before, we asked users about their exposure to various extremist and disinformation topics in online games, and we found the most predominant one was white supremacy, but we were also seeing 9/11, conspiracy theories, Holocaust denial, anti-vax information, all sorts of kinds of disinformation and misinformation that you might expect in a traditional social media platform. And I think to wrap up the sort of survey section here and to transition into a little bit about what can be done, in the same way that John Perry Barlow is talking about the potential of digital spaces broadly, we also looked in our survey at positive social experiences in online games. Online games gets a bad rap as toxic spaces, as places full of hate and harassment, which in many ways they are. But they also are extremely powerful, positive social spaces as well. As you can see in our survey, 88% of respondents said that they experience positive social experiences in online games. They make friends. They discover new interests. They learn about interesting topics or about themselves. They find 13% of folks found a partner in online games. And so the reason we do this work is not to push people out of digital spaces or to demonize social media or online games, but to make sure that all people have the ability to experience the positive and powerful nature of these digital social spaces regardless of their identity. And so I'll talk a little bit about what can adults do to help young people, specifically with regard to online games. So the three things that I generally tell folks are to educate yourself on the rules of online games and discuss them with young people, to watch positive game streamers with young people and to discuss how they play in those spaces, and to educate yourself on the mechanisms by which you can flag hate and harassment in online games and discuss that with the young people in your life. So every game has a set of rules, just like Facebook, just like Twitter has a set of rules about how their platform functions, what is acceptable, what is not, and you can take the time to review the rules and discuss them with the young people in your life. Talk to them about what games they're playing, look at the rules, look at where there are gaps in the rules. So here's an example from Roblox, which is a popular game among 7 to 12-year-olds. Roblox does a really good job of laying out their community rules. Other games do less of a good job. So talk to the young people in your life about the rules as set forth by the game company. Are they doing a good job? Do they mirror the kind of values that you would want to impart in your young person in a physical space? And use it as an opportunity for engagement with the young people in your life. And then, so there's a website called Twitch where streamers who are essentially sort of public figures that play games in a way that's entertaining, where a community engages with them and watches them play. There are certainly people who do that in a way that is toxic, and there are people who do that in a way that is inclusive and respectful. I think a particularly good example of this comes from the transgender and broader LGBTQIA+ community. If you look in the bios of different streamers who share different identities, they typically lay out the rules of their community in sort of a great amount of detail. And those that have these rules set out can be a great resource for you in terms of thinking of, okay, is this a stream I should watch with my young person? Is this a place where we can learn about what it means to play in a pro-social environment? You know, there are. I'll read one streamer's sort of about information. She says, "I want to change the public's perception of the transgender person by being a charming, skilled, and down-to-earth human being, while also providing educational resources that are often omitted from school and health systems. I want this community to be a safe place where people can chill, talk about their passions, and let their true colors shine." So if you see messages like that on the About pages of various Twitch streamers that you want to engage and chat with your young people in your life about, I would say definitely go for that. The last thing I would say is, in addition to learning about the rules, in addition to modeling pro-social engagement, I would say educate yourself on how to flag hate and harassment in online games and discuss them with young people. Fortnite, for example, lays out a very clear path to reporting hate and harassment in the game, and these reports allow the companies to take action and protect your young person, but also give the company information about what is happening in their game so that they can make improvements more broadly for more players. So that's sort of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions via the interface here, and I'll pass it along now to my colleague Chuck Cohen here from the Vice President of the National White Collar Crime Center.
Great, thank you, Daniel. I really do appreciate that. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk more specifically about online criminal radicalization. And before I talk about that, just to preface it with, while we talk about technology and how it has implications, technology is neutral. It's not good or bad. It doesn't make people commit crimes or not commit crimes. It's just technology. But what is true is technology is intrinsically interwoven in criminal radicalization, because so many young people that are susceptible to criminal radicalization spend time using technology. And I know you've seen lots of charts and graphs so far, so I'll try to limit that down. But basically all we're looking at is the fact that a lot of young people spend a lot of time interacting with others, and they do it online, whether that's through cellular connections or other kinds of internet-based connections. And what that means is there is a large pool, because of this available technology, for vulnerable victims to becoming criminally radicalized. And if we're looking at who the most vulnerable victims are of young people, we find people that either perceive themselves as being, or in reality are, having limited family support, that perceive themselves as, or in reality are, socially isolated from other more traditional social outlets, oftentimes that have a history of financial or social failure, but also individuals, particularly for criminal radicalization, that are seeking adventure and independence and a sense of belonging. Those are the most vulnerable of young people to be radicalized online. And the radicalization is a four-step process. Essentially, if we're looking at historically those that are radicalized online, it starts with the first phase of it being a pre-radicalization, or it starts to. This is the first time when young people are exposed online to extremist propaganda, and they're doing this through a variety of platforms. If you want to know what platform, it basically is the platform where people spend most of the time. And if you look at research done in the middle of 2018, you're looking at the top platforms to deliver online social media or online content. So for those that are looking to radicalize young people for a variety of purposes, they go where young people go to consume their online media. So you have to look no further than where young people are going, again, to consume that media. Second step is once they are exposed to that content, that radicalizing content, young people will start to then self-identify. This is the phase for those that directly interact with young people, with juveniles, where you're going to start to see those young people potentially doodling symbols in notebooks, where you're going to see potentially some people start to get tattoos, or to start to seek out and identify more information and more content for whatever that particular radical ideology is. You're going to see them start to seek out websites like you see on the bottom right of your screen, which is a website for the Indiana Hammerskins, or a neo-Nazi white supremacist group, where you're going to start to see them identifying young people as they start to self-identify, develop interests that he didn't have before, and it can be identified as one part of that self-identification. The next step is indoctrination. Oftentimes in this phase of the radicalization process, this is where that recruiter online is going to start a dialogue, a two-way communication. Oftentimes that recruiter is going to move the young person into a one-on-one internet-based platform. Oftentimes the challenge for law enforcement is many of these platforms, in fact, all the platforms you see on this particular slide are end-to-end encrypted, meaning from a criminal investigative standpoint, this is the part where that communication between that young person that might be enticed, being groomed to engage in a criminal act or a violent act, that communication where law enforcement investigators start to go dark, start to not have that insight and that communication, because that indoctrination is happening again one-on-one, and that is happening on that encrypted platform. And I put this up here, and I intentionally use that word grooming, because a lot of my investigative background is in internet-based crimes against children, oftentimes internet-based sex crimes against children. And the grooming process, where that child is being groomed for sexual purposes, or where that child is being groomed for radicalization, there's a lot of consistency between the two, and a lot of consistency in how that process works. Oftentimes, whether that child is being groomed online by a sex offender or being groomed online by someone that wants to criminally radicalize them, it's going to be done through a combination of attention, affection, and gifts. They're going to move that child from small secrets to big secrets being shared between us. And on purpose, I put tobacco up there, because oftentimes we see tobacco being used specifically in that grooming process. Again, whether that is sexual grooming of the child online or grooming the child for radicalization online. That is a small secret. That is something that if that person that has radicalized a child gets found out, they're providing them with tobacco, and by the way, even more recently, providing them with vaping products and the ability to vape, there isn't a huge criminal penalty for that. But again, you'll see that grooming process being discussed of, I trust you, I understand you're an adult, I love you, I care for you, I'm giving you attention, I value your worth, while others may not. The real only difference is we're talking about grooming the child for sexual exploitation. Oftentimes that's an individual. Come spend time with me. I trust you. I look at you as an adult. I value even though others don't in your life. or you perceive others don't in your life. The only difference is we're talking about grooming that child for radicalization. It's come be part of this group, come be part of this movement, come be part of us. We understand your value even if others don't understand your value. That's the argument being made to that child, again, through that three-way combination of attention, affection, and gifts. And the last of the four in the sequence is the radicalization itself. This is the point when that young person, again, with their child being under 18 under US law, or whether that is an adult, a young adult, that's the point when that person has become radicalized to the point where they're going to engage in criminal acts or violent acts, which in and of themselves are criminal. This is the point where we're also going to see an integration of online social media and the use of technology increasingly. One of the trends we've seen is something that's referred to as a decrease in flash to bang, meaning once that young person becomes radicalized, they're going to start to radicalize others, but they're also going to discuss online their intentions to engage in that particular criminal act or that particular violent act. But what we used to see was the discussion among that radicalized young person that's going to engage in a criminal or violent act happening weeks or months prior to that violent act. We're now increasingly seeing that time from flash, where we start to see that something we potentially can interdict to when they engage in that violent act tends to be decreasing, getting shorter in time between the two. The other trend we are seeing is increasingly live streaming, again on various available live streaming social media platforms of the violent or criminal act themselves. Whether it's a criminal act like engaging in graffitiing, racist, anti-Semitic, and Islamophobic type graffiti, whether that criminal act is putting pamphlets out, or the criminal act involves actual violence against person, where that act is being live streamed increasingly, where we didn't see that, frankly, just 24 to 36 months previously. We've got some very recent examples of both that decreased flash to bang, where we're posting online to the activity, as well as the live streaming. So you have to look no further than just 13 months ago, and the New Zealand mosque shooter, who just 14 minutes prior to firing the first shot, as widely reported in the media, just 14 minutes before that, posted his intention to engage in this violent act and it was going to occur. Now, preceding that, he did post manifestos, and you can see the progress of him being radicalized through these 4 steps online. You can start to see when he first was exposed. You can start in the pre-radicalization process. You can start to see when he started to identify with a particular ideology and that occurring online. Then you can see where he was talking one-on-one online with others that were essentially radicalizing him further, and he started to self-identify, and then him posting online. To the point that just this month, it was widely reported that several members that had attended services in those 2 mosques had seen him coming in for at least the 3 preceding Friday services in those mosques and praying with them leading up to this. So we have that, again, those indicators online. Moving forward in time to April 9th of last year, a shooting that occurred in Germany, widely referred to as the Helle synagogue shooting, where an individual that was motivated and had become radicalized in an anti-Semitic ideology shot 9 people, fatally shooting 2 of those 9 people, killing 2 of them. He discussed the plan ahead of time on a particular image board. He wrote on the image board, among other things, that he was making DIY weapons in recent years using a 3D printer. He actually invited anyone that wanted to see him do what he referred to as, quote, a live test, unquote, that he was going to post this on a Twitch stream. And sure enough, as he was engaged in this criminal violent act, he did Twitch. Very similarly to how the New Zealand shooter previously live streamed fairly infamously his acts at those 2 mosques. You can look to February of this year as a shooter in Thailand that was likely motivated through particular radical ideology, was again streaming live on various platforms, both his violent act and actually interacting with members of the public, interacting with the police while he was engaged in a criminal act on various online social media platforms. We're also seeing additionally the use of how technology and online social media platforms, social networking platforms, are impacting the use of various symbols and the meaning of various symbols, as the ADL that Daniel represents, as they showed in their research. The OK symbol basically started as a meme or a joke in 2017 on an image hosting site called 4chan. Basically a joke. Can we make people believe that this OK symbol is actually a racist symbol or an anti-Semitic symbol? And actually on 4chan they call it OKKK, or Operation KKK. Can we make people believe this? But what happened is the tail started to wag the dog. So you move forward to that New Zealand shooter that you see in the center of your screen, actually in court after engaging in the violent act, flashing that symbol. What started out as a joke now has become a symbol that others that have become radicalized or trying to radicalize others have adopted. And we can see him flashing that in court on March 16th of this year, just over a month ago. I'm sorry, just over 14 months ago. We can also see others, as you see in the smaller pictures, that have adopted this symbol that started as a joke. And then the last example to show you, and in more detail, is Dylan Roof, and the example of his process of radicalization and how he actually stands as a symbol that is currently being used by some to radicalize others to engage in violent acts. As many of you are aware, on June 17th, 2015, he killed 9 people that were engaged in a Bible study at Mother Emanuel Church. He completed this violent act in just 6 minutes, killed 9 people in 6 minutes. If you look on the right-hand side, you can see that for a long period of time on his particular Facebook profile, the jacket he wore had flags of 2 countries that are widely associated with apartheid government. But also, he just roughly 4 months prior to the violent event, registered a domain, created his own website that he called The Last Rhodesian. And I apologize for the graphic image here, but again, this is an image he chose to post on his site that is widely shared among some that have a white supremacist or white separatist viewpoint as apocryphal demonstration that in their viewpoint and to radicalize others, that white people are not treated fairly and subject to violence from others. He posted just 3 hours and 21 minutes on the website prior to when he walked into that church, that at the time of this writing, I am in a great hurry, and posted his intentions just 3.5 hours ahead of time. He then went to that church. He studied and sat with those parishioners for roughly an hour prior to it killing 9 of them. We can see also, by the way, when you look at his registration, and this is information about how he registered, how he basically took control of that website, thelastRhodesian.com, that he did this in this case using an email address he created, DerekJeter88@Yandex.com. Now, Yandex is a Russian-based platform very similar to Google in many ways. It offers search functions and other functions, including email, similar to Google, Russian-based. But he chose the name Derek Jeter, because he is a famous sports figure who very publicly has discussed his biracial heritage. He chose 88 after that because 88 in some communities identified as being symbolic for the term Heil Hitler. H is the 8th letter of the alphabet. So you'll see many neo-Nazis and others that will use 88 to represent HH or Heil Hitler. And he again registered this with that symbolism in mind. I just want to show you some of the images, some of the pictures of himself and others that he chose to post, both on his Facebook account and on the website that he chose to register, the domain that he registered. And again, a better look at his jacket, where you have both Rhodesian flag and the South African flag, the South African, specifically apartheid South African flag, that he chose to put patches on his jacket. We can see other symbols from when he went to visit, or some other pictures from when he went to visit a slave plantation, and specifically sought out to look at a former slave plantation, where he is posing at various locations during that particular visit, posting this both on his website and on his Facebook profile. Pictures he chose to post to social media from when he visited a slave cemetery that's adjacent to that plantation. Pictures of him again with a Confederate flag and at a Confederate history museum. And I'm putting these in somewhat chronological order so you can see that radicalization process as he moves forward. And finally, posing with a firearm, one of the firearms that is believed that he did use when he went into Mother Emanuel Church. As well as, again, you see 1488. 14 is a symbol we also see a lot with white supremacy, standing for the 14 words that has been somewhat infamously, again, identified with the white supremacist or white separatist movement. In addition, he also posted a 2,400 word manifesto, where again, he is talking about his ideology, all of these indicators and progression of the radicalization, and now that he has engaged in this violent act, and he has now been imprisoned for that, and sentenced for that, we see his manifesto, and we see also some of those images I showed you being used by others in all 4 steps of the radicalization process in online communications and being posted in various social media and social networking platforms online. This is just a portion, again, of the manifesto. And at the top, we can again see those common symbols being used, like the 88. But with that said, we can also talk about the quote from the friend, where the friend is talking about he doesn't believe that his ultimate target was Mother Emanuel Church. That was likely just the first step, much like the New Zealand mosque shooter that went to multiple targets once he engaged in this criminal violent act. Likely, Dylan was interdicted on his way to engage in a second and possibly more or larger violent act. But with all that said, the last thing I want to leave you with is the challenge this poses to criminal investigators and public sector law enforcement, particularly for those of you in this webinar who are not from the law enforcement community. One of the challenges we encounter is federal law, and in most states, state law, where when we are looking at what many young people post online, and what people post online that is being targeted towards young people, the challenge that in order for us to collect this, in order for us to action it from a criminal investigative standpoint, we need to have a reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. What that means is specific articulable facts or a criminal predicate because of the First Amendment and the requirement of individual and the ability for individuals to have freedom of speech and freedom of expression, including political speech and religious speech. Oftentimes, the challenge police face is they get notified about content that may be indicative of one of the early steps along the process of radicalization online, but there isn't that reasonable suspicion of criminal activity or specific articulable facts that would allow police to take action. That's why it's so critical that those of you that directly interact in school settings and other settings with young people, that as you become aware that a young person may be moving down this path of radicalization, that before it becomes an issue where law enforcement can or should become involved, that you find ways to interdict that and break that cycle as that person may be becoming radicalized. With that said, I appreciate everyone's time, and for sake of time, let me go ahead and pass this on to my colleague Jerry and let her be the fourth speaker to kind of bring this all to conclusion for us.
Great. Thank you very much, Chuck. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be speaking to you about some of the resources that the Justice Department has for situations involving online hate, and in particular, when that hate has expanded from the individual level, but is also rising throughout a community and causing community-level tension. I am the Deputy Director of the Community Relations Service, which is a component of the Justice Department. We have a long history working with communities that are dealing with tensions. Originally, when we were first created under the Civil Rights Act back in 1964, we worked with communities who were working to reduce tensions related to race, color, and national origin. Now, back in 1964, there wasn't any online hate, but there was enough hate in person that we were kept quite busy. Of course, the world has changed since then. Another way the world changed for us was that in 2009, our jurisdiction expanded under the Hate Crimes Prevention Act to also support communities working to reduce tensions and respond to hate crimes related not just to race, color, national origin, but also gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, and disability status. And all of these areas, as you very well know, appear in situations involving online hate and bullying. The services we provide to communities who are working to respond to incidents of online hate or be proactive and work to get ahead of such incidents are always done, first of all, free. Second of all, we are impartial. We come in as neutral facilitators and support communities working to address these issues. We work confidentially, and we work upon request. So our work is always voluntary. We are not litigators. We are not investigators. So we do not come in and judge a situation, but we say, let's get all the parties involved, and what can we do to support the work the community wants to do to respond to the online hate or bullying that is causing community conflict. We work with communities in 4 large areas of services. Facilitation basically means helping convening the parties in sessions of dialogue, in action planning, and I'll go over a few specific instances of that in a minute. We, not so much in the online world, but we do conduct formal mediations when that's appropriate to help a community. We have trainings that we conduct, and then we also are available for consultation, which is working with communities to share best practices and technical assistance. We work with all types of community groups across the United States, in every state and every territory. We work with law enforcement groups, schools, faith-based groups, civil rights groups, local officials. We will work with any group that approaches us and asks for our support. Our work typically falls into these 3 service areas. Many of our cases are fact patterns that involve local law enforcement. Again, not so much in the online hate and bullying context, but in other work that we do. A very big category of our work involves supporting schools and education officials in tackling tensions at schools, bias incidents, hate crimes, and obviously this is where a lot of online hate and bullying manifests when it spills out into conflict between groups in the schools or even larger in the communities. So we also work at the community level to help community groups even more, in addition to schools, respond to hate crimes, bias incidents, and other forms of bullying and online hate that lead to group level tensions and conflicts. So particularly in this, the subject of our webinar today, the digital hate and cyberbullying, we would most often be approached by a school, sometimes by city officials, letting us know that there's been a hate incident that has become known to a group or groups to the level that it is causing tension and conflicts, and they're requesting our help. We would most often facilitate some type of a program that brings together those groups to talk about what exactly is the source of the conflict and what could be done that works for the local environment that they think would be good to do, because these are all local discussions with local solutions, to respond to the incident or incidents and try to take preventative steps. Most often these will involve developing action plans and working groups. We try to be very concrete and help communities and schools, particularly working with groups of students, brainstorm specific actions that they think would help prevent additional online hate, would help address the types of conflicts that often give rise to online hate, and help the school or community move forward. This slide shows you the names of our specific programs that we offer to schools and communities that ask us to help them put together a process to respond to online hate or bullying where it's led to community level tension. And I'm going to go through a few cases in the next slides where we did conduct, you see here in the first bullet, a school spirit. We have worked with campus groups and done facilitated dialogue, so I will discuss those in the context of a couple case studies coming up. And then also, when there's been online hate that is so public, you know, it's not just among a small group, but it's become so public that multiple communities are aware of it and are feeling tension around it. When it is connected to one of our jurisdictions, which, you know, many instances, as we know, of online hate do have to do with race, color, national origin, religion, LGBTQ status, disability status, gender. And so when there is bullying or online hate that is occurring around one of those categories, when it's out at the community level, to the extent that community groups are asking the very big picture questions. What's the status of the investigation? You know, does this count as a hate crime? Does it meet that eligibility to be investigated as a hate crime? What are victims' resources? We can pull together educational sessions that we call bias incidents and hate crimes forums and bring in panels of your local experts to brief the community on what can be shared about an investigation. Right, often it's not a lot, right, at least in the beginning, but what can be shared? Where should hate crimes be reported? What are victims' resources? We connect the experts with the community so you know who to call when something happens. And then we are always available to do customized sessions and just share best practices with you. The first case I want to talk about, I've got 4 cases that we have worked on in the last few years. This was a case out of a Minnesota high school where, as you can see here in the summary, a picture of a black student with the noose around his neck was circulated on Snapchat. So you can imagine a lot of people saw it, a lot of people were very upset. It was captioned with the phrase, "Gotta hang 'em all." That was sparked significant conflict within the community, which demanded that steps be taken to address the underlying historical tensions that would have even led to such an incident. So we were asked to come into the school and put together a day-long session that we call a school spirit. And you can see the acronym spelled out on the slide here. In a school spirit, we take groups of students, break them up into small groups, and have them brainstorm what are the problems at the school that led to this type of an incident? What are the challenges they see at the school that they would like to see improved? And then in the second half of the day, we mix up the groups again, and we have them brainstorm solutions. So the session is very much focused on concrete actions, empowering students. This student spirit is comprised of, adults are planning, but the session itself is 100% students who get some experience being empowered to brainstorm solutions to school problems, which doesn't happen all the time, at least in the students' minds, right? That they actually are asked, well, what do you think we should do to address these problems and do better and make progress? So the students themselves brainstorm solutions to the problems they've identified, and then those are written up in a report, and then a council is formed of the students, and again, this of course is also overseen by adults, and then the council meets over the following months to work to implement some of those actions that were identified the day of the spirit. So the idea is every group in the school gets to be involved in discussing the problem and working to come up with solutions to address it. If you're interested in knowing more about this particular case, there is a video on our website that describes what we did and has some of the reactions from the students and the administrators. The second case I want to mention a little more quickly was in Connecticut with 2 high schools. You can see here that students were shown in a photo in blackface that went around on social media, and even though they were suspended, the community groups didn't feel that that was a sufficient response. And we were brought in to do not a school spirit, but a bigger program called a city spirit, where it wasn't just students talking about what had happened and what to do, but groups across the city. So city administrators, educators, faith-based leaders, parents, who were able to talk at quite the policy level about what was going on in their town historically and systemically that could make it acceptable for such an incident to happen. And coming out of that, the town created an equity council to come up with concrete actions, including about better diversity among the educational staff, the faculty and the teachers at the schools, and a spirit council, which was comprised of students from the 2 high schools, to implement actions that were a little more on the high school level, school level. The next case is from Pennsylvania, where we had pumpkins carved with the swastika and the letters KKK. There were other fact patterns leading to racial conflict, LGBTQ concerns, and we did a school spirit there with 9th and 10th graders that also started with brainstorming and led with actions being identified to address this quite wide range of concerns. And then finally, in Seattle, this is a little bit of different services to let you know about. There was hate crime related or hate incident related cyberbullying, other concerns, and we were asked to train the students to be facilitators of dialogues about these concerns. And so we did a training in facilitation skills, and then the students themselves, this was high school and university, were able to facilitate dialogues with students, educators, and law enforcement to share their stories of the bullying and hate crimes they had experienced, and as a step toward healing and moving forward. Our offices are spread around the country. We are small but quite dispersed throughout. You can see here we have 14 offices, not including our DC headquarters. And on our website, you can see our specific contact information, or you can just send an email to askcrs@usdoj.gov. asking to be connected to the right regional office. So askcrs@usdoj.gov. Here's the rest of our contact information. And then I know I'm out of time, so just very quickly, I wanted to make sure you're aware that the department also has a hate crimes website that is a portal of consolidated information for not just law enforcement, but also community members, victims, teachers, advocacy groups. It has training information. It has videos, research reports, facts, and statistics. And I don't know if you can see the website address is justice.gov/hate crimes. And along the left, you can see the various sub-web pages of information, and it's just worth it to scroll through some of the pages. You can see there's case examples, resources, prevention, materials on prevention, and then some specific Q&As. And this is a site that's updated fairly frequently and worth you looking at if you have not yet. So justice.gov/hate crimes. And I welcome questions or folks reaching out with specific questions now or later. Thank you so much.
Presenters, I want to thank you all so much for doing an amazing job and giving us such rich information. It's been fantastic. And I want to thank everybody in the audience for hanging in there. I know it was hard to hear for some of you, so thank you guys so much. We do have time for a few questions, and I know some of you sent some questions in, so I'll read those. The first question I'm going to direct towards Anjali. The question is, can legal action be taken against a person that's doing cyberbullying?
I guess it depends.
So in terms of cyberbullying and legal action here in Silicon Valley, it's going to depend on jurisdiction. I know with regards to different cyberbullying laws across the nation, not one single, like sextortion, for example, has not been adopted across the board. So it's really going to be dependent upon jurisdiction, state, and the content of what's being shared in cyberbullying. So, for example, if sexual content in its nature is being shared and is a part of the cyberbullying, it can be a form of sextortion, which will be then sent over to an ICAC task force unit, depending on where it originated from and what jurisdiction will be responsible for it.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question is for Chuck. Chuck, what role can a school resource officer play in trying to combat digital?
And I apologize for the trying to get the mic switched over. Essentially, school resource officers oftentimes are in the best situation to be aware in the early steps of the radicalization process. They are in the best position to see when there is a particular individual, a particular student, or a particular group of students that might be targeted for victimization based on some form of bias. They also are in the best position to see if someone is in the process of being radicalized or become radicalized, one of the students or a group of students. So oftentimes the school resource officers are in the best position to basically be that bridge, that conduit between what is traditionally matters that the school becomes aware of and the school system becomes aware of, and those matters that might also at some point require involvement from a more traditional criminal justice or law enforcement perspective.
The next question is regarding this is for you, Daniel, how do we decrease negative, hateful behavior online and increase compassion and empathy?
That's a good question. So I think I would say, well, one, I would say we can't really know how to do that because the data that's shared by tech companies with the public and with researchers is so minimal at this point that it's really hard to track. It's hard to do the testing and the research necessary to be able to test effective interventions that in a way that actually gets us what is effective in a scientific manner. But what I would say is something you see in the game world that you don't see as much in the social media world is sort of designing for thinking about design interventions to encourage positive behaviors rather than just focusing on the purely punitive, which a lot of social media companies do. So I would say, companies, designers need to think about how they can design their products so that they encourage these kinds of behaviors and base that on research.
Great, thank you, Daniel. This next question, I'm going to open it up to whoever would like to answer. With the move to virtual learning due to COVID-19, what tips can we offer parents and educators about keeping kids safe online who are online more than usual, especially if a parent's working at home and can't monitor all online activities?
So, Angeli here. So I did put in my presentation for providers that have moved to that online platform, such as schools especially. There have been great examples provided on how they can use social media as a method of teaching to engage children on those platforms and to keep them participating in activities such as like TikTok with PSAs about cyberbullying and even subject matter topics for school, just turning it into a more positive environment. I think sadly right now at this point you can't really get away from it, and having more time spending at home and exploring different apps, what providers can be doing is just taking it and providing healthy forms of communications on those platforms alternatively as we have to adjust to this during this time.
Thank you, Angeli. We're running out of time, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us. Please stay safe and healthy during this time with COVID-19, and I'm going to quickly turn it over to William. Go ahead, William.
Yes. Thank you, Steffi. And again, to our audience, again, apologies for the technical difficulties, but please note, as we mentioned, that we do have this webinar recorded, and it will be available on our YouTube page at a later date. A couple of quick announcements before we end completely here. Just wanted to provide you all with some contact information for NTTAC. You can reach us here at this site, or you can click on this link here in order to sign up for our listserv where you can be notified for upcoming webinars that we have. If you'd like to get in contact with OJJDP's NTTAC, you may do so by contacting us or contacting the help desk at the 1-800 number here. You can also go to the email address here and email us, and we can address any of your questions as well. Do you have a training or technical assistance need? Well, if so, feel free to submit a request via the OJJDP TTA 360 platform. The link is located here. Again, our webinar will be available on the YouTube page. Please feel free to access the page at the link here on this slide. And again, these slides are located in the handouts pod. Please note the following disclaimer. And finally, if you all can please join us for these upcoming events. The registration links for these events are live. You may register now. And with that being said, I will bring up one final poll question for you all here at the very end. So feel free to take a few moments to complete this poll here. Again, thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful afternoon.